Well, let's go live now to John Kiriakou, a former CIA agent turned whistleblower. Thanks for joining us today on RT. I guess, firstly, do you think there is any evidence of Russian interference in the US presidential election? I mean, if so, why keep it quiet?
Well, I agree with that. I've actually written extensively about this, and if there is proof, I would like to see the proof. And I think that that the CIA owes it to the American people, as does the White House, to present that proof and to allow us to make a decision on our own.
And these latest sanctions were obviously unveiled after a joint FBI and Homeland Security report came out. Did you find its contents convincing at all?
No. I understand that there's some smoke. I want to see where the fire is. And as I said, I think that the White House owes the American people that. It's one thing to make an accusation like this. It's an entirely different thing to take action by expelling diplomats and closing facilities. So either the Obama administration really does believe that it has proof, or it's taking a parting shot at President Putin.
And President Putin says this is not the time for such unfriendly actions as expelling diplomats and their families, etc. But I guess just how damaging has this move been by Washington to Russia-US relations?
Well, I think it would be far more damaging if there were any more time left in President Obama's administration. President-elect Trump can certainly turn this around in just a few weeks when he takes the oath of office. So I think that this is not as damaging as it could be. But with that said, the way things work out in these instances is that the Russian government is going to have to expel an equal number of American diplomats in Russia and also to close an equal number of American facilities there.
Just going back to that report issued by Homeland Security and FBI, that report says it's published for informational purposes only. It's got a clear disclaimer there. Does that mean there's still no proof at all provided by Washington of this alleged interference and hacking?
I think what that means is that they don't want to provide any proof, that we're just going to have to take their words for it.
Indeed, and as part of that new sanctions on Russia, the US is also closing a couple of compounds where Russian diplomats and their families are supposed to spend Christmas and New Year holidays. They now have 72 hours, obviously, to leave the country. What do you think about that step? Is that a normal in this sort of diplomatic international relations?
It is actually normal. What's not normal is the number of diplomats. That's actually huge in my experience. It's not unusual to expel 1 or 2 or 5 diplomats, but this number is quite remarkable.
All right, John Kiriakou, former CIA agent turned whistleblower, would like to stay with you just for a few more minutes to get some more insight, just while we just go over some more facts about that hacking scandal. Do stay with us just for a few more minutes.
Thank you.
Well, the lack of specifics in the report has spurred a fair bit of online mockery. A prominent cybersecurity expert tweeted this list of valuable information from the report. WikiLeaks has reacted to the US sanctions and set up a poll asking if those being forced out of America should just hide out until Donald Trump rolls back the measures. Well, the whistleblower site, which released Democratic Party campaign emails, also noticed that it was not mentioned in the joint report put together by the Department of National Security and the FBI. Former UK Member of Parliament George Galloway revealed that WikiLeaks editor Julian Assange told him it was an insider who leaked the emails. Well, let's get back to our guest, John Kiriakou, whistleblower, former CIA agent. So, John, I don't know if you heard there, WikiLeaks, who published the actual emails, claims that it was an insider who leaked the information and not Russia. That's received very little attention, hasn't it? Both in the media, there's not been any investigation into these claims. Correct me if I'm wrong. Why has there been so little attention to this?
Well, I think that the media hasn't paid any attention because it doesn't fit their agenda. I think that the evidence is actually very good, that this was either an inside job or it was the result of a phishing scheme, and that the Clinton campaign manager, John Podesta, fell for it. But I think there's a more important issue here, and the issue is, how has the American media and the American government defined hacking? What exactly is it that Russia was supposed to have done? Are we saying that the Russians hacked John Podesta's emails? Okay, let's assume that they did. Big deal. what effect did it have on our election? Now, if the administration is arguing that the Russian government somehow affected the vote and turned the vote, that's different. But even the White House hasn't said that. So I think that this is really a red herring. This is something that that is not as big a deal as the White House is telling people it is. And this is actually a political issue rather than a national security one.
And of course, the White House also criticized the American media for publishing the DNC leaks. They said it turned news outlets into a Russian intelligence tool. Quite a strong accusation there. Do you expect the government now to go after the media?
Oh, this president has already gone after the media. You know, when a working journalist is described by the American Justice Department as an unindicted co-conspirator for simply doing his job and reporting on national security, then you have an unprecedented poor relationship between the administration and the press.
All right, John Kiriakou, whistleblower and former CIA agent, thanks for joining us on RT.
Sure.
Once again, we'd like you to stay with us just for a few more minutes. We'd like to get your insight just on another part of the story. We'll come back to you just very shortly. US President-elect Donald Trump has issued a statement on the sanctions. He called on the US to move on to bigger and better things, adding he'll meet with intelligence chiefs next week. And meanwhile, Trump's senior advisor, Kellyanne Conway, expressed her concern over the measures.
Even those who are sympathetic to President Obama on most issues are saying that part of the reason he did this today was to, quote, box in President-elect Trump. That would be very unfortunate if that were if politics were the motivating factor here.
Well, let's get back to our guest again, John Kiriakou, former CIA agent and whistleblower. Would you agree that the measures against Russia could indeed be an attempt to box in the Trump administration? We've already heard the measures could be reversed. Would you agree with that analysis?
I actually would agree with that. President Obama certainly has not made it easy for President Trump to improve relations with Russia. And this just adds one layer of diplomatic trouble on top of the already poor relations between our two countries.
Obviously, the sanctions against Russia are very multi-layered, aren't they, dating back to 2014. Now, this latest layer, seems to have a new set added every few months or every year. Do you expect the Trump administration to reverse any of those sanctions, if at all?
Well, if the Trump administration's beliefs that the CIA and the rest of the intelligence community really is not all that it's cracked up to be, turn out to be true, that really is President-elect Trump's real feeling about the intelligence community, then I expect the sanctions to be short-lived. There may be some lingering sanctions on individuals who may have played a part in this scandal, but I think many of those sanctions really will be short-lived.
What do you think about the timing, in particular, of these sanctions? We saw just a day ago the announcement of the Syrian ceasefire negotiated by Turkey, Russia and Iran. And, of course, the US was notably sidelined from that. Many analysts are saying this could have in some way been linked, or is it just a coincidence?
I think it's probably a coincidence, but you know, let's just say it outright here. Syria was a major foreign policy failure for John Kerry and for the White House. And so there's certainly no love lost on Syria between the United States and Russia, and now, as things turn out, Turkey.
And in terms of Mr. Putin's response, obviously people were expecting a retaliation measure, which is entirely justified. And normally what happens in this sort of tit-for-tat diplomat expulsion. Yet he said no measures will be taken, no hurdles will be set up for diplomats. And he's indeed invited the families, the children of US diplomats in Moscow to celebrate New Year in the Kremlin. Was that quite an unexpected course of action, perhaps, for Mr. Putin?
That was unexpected, and I think it bodes very well for U.S.-Russian relations starting in about 3 weeks.
All right, do stay with us. Just once again, John, we'll get back to you just in a few moments. Back to our guest, John Kiriakou, whistleblower, former CIA agent. We heard there that hacking scandals, cyber warfare is nothing new in international relations, is it? I mean, as somebody who worked, obviously, in the intelligence community, would you say cyber warfare, hacking accusations, counter-accusations, this is a sort of perhaps a new front in geopolitical conflict globally?
I think it is, and I think it's a fact of life. This is something that every country does to its friends and its enemies alike. It's just the way things are now. So it strikes me as funny when one country accuses another of launching a cyber attack, when in fact that country is most likely doing exactly the same thing.
Of course, one of the funniest, ironic things here, you said everybody's doing it to friends, to enemies. Of course, I believe it was just last year that saw a major scandal in Europe with, it turns out, American intelligence agencies spying on European leaders, Angela Merkel, the United Nations, many international organizations. It just strikes me as a bit ironic when the US is perhaps one of the leaders in this sort of thing, that they suspect Russia could influence an entire election. I mean, how far-fetched really are those claims that Russia could have manipulated the election of perhaps the sole superpower right now in the world?
Well, exactly. Do I believe that the Russians hacked the DNC and maybe even the RNC to gather information? Yes, I do, because that's just the way things are. It's a fact of life. Do I believe that the Russians somehow influenced the American elections to elect Donald Trump as president? No, I think that's ridiculous. That's just not real life. It doesn't happen that way. And if it did happen, the White House has to present the proof to the American people and to let us judge on our own. And it has not done that.
All right, John Kiriakou, whistleblower, former CIA agent. Thanks for joining us here on RT. It's been interesting getting your insight and talking to you today. Thank you.